Hey mathematicians, this is lesson 10.3 for algebra, solving quadratic equations. So, solving quadratic equations, I'm going to show you two different ways. So here is the definition. A quadratic equation is an equation that can be written in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Okay? Where a cannot equal 0. A has to be 1 or greater. This form is called the standard form. So we've kind of already talked about that, so just jot that down. That's the standard form. A quadratic equation can have 2, 1, or no real number solutions. In a future course, you will learn about solutions of quadratic equations that are not real numbers. In this course, solutions refer to real number solutions. So, as you travel further on in math, you'll see that you can get an irrational number or non-real number. But this, we're just going to be dealing with whole number answers. Okay? The solutions of a quadratic equation are, and the related x-intercepts are often called the roots of the equation or zeros of the function. So, here's an example. So you might want to jot down these three little graphs and then write down what their solutions are. So it says, solve each equation by graphing the related function. So here's the function. Okay, if you notice, -4 is the y-intercept. Okay, and then they figured out that 2 squared minus 4 is 0. So that was here. And -2 is here. So they graphed this, and there are two solutions. And they do the plus and negative of 2. So they write it like this, plus minus 2. That means positive 2 and negative 2. They just do that instead of writing it like this. That is the exact same thing. So on this one, if you look, this is the root x squared. It's just plain y equals x squared. This only has one solution because it meets the x-axis at 0. So what would make that true? 0 squared equals 0. That's the only thing that can make that true. So this has one solution. Now here, this one doesn't even intercept the x-axis. So if you have x squared plus 4, it will never equal 0 because this number right here is always going to be a positive number because anything squared is always positive. A negative times a negative is a positive. So when you have a positive and you add 4, nothing will ever be able to get it to 0. So there is no solution for this problem. Okay, so graph this. Solve each equation by graphing the related function. So graph this real quick on your notes, and then we'll talk about the solutions. Okay, so solve each equation by graphing the related function. You can do this a couple different ways. If you like, you can do the table, and you could pick 3 points and graph it. Or you can do negative b over 2a. So that would be, there is no b, because if you look at this, there's no b. So that would be negative 0 over 2 times 1. So if you look at this, that really is not helpful whatsoever. So let's go back to our table. So -1 squared is 1, minus 1 is 0. 0 squared minus 1 is -1. And 1 squared, which is 1, minus 1 is 0. So if we graph this, we go -1, 0, 0, -1, and over 1, 0. So here is our graph. And this has two solutions, which are plus and minus 1. Positive and negative 1. Okay, the other way that I think is a lot easier is to find the square roots. So what you do essentially is you solve this equation. You take this equation, you add 98 to both sides. If you look right here, that's what they did. So then they get 2 squared equals 98. 2 times x squared equals 98. You divide by 2, and then you take the square root. It's much easier, and then you don't have to graph, and you can solve the equation pretty quickly. So here's what you would do. You're going to add 25 to both sides. So then you get t squared equals 25. So then I know t equals plus or minus 5. Positive or negative 5 would make this correct. Here I'm going to minus 12. So then I get 3n squared equals 0. Divide by 3. 0 divided by 3 is 0. So n squared equals 0. So n equals 0. Here I'm going to minus 32. So then you get 2g squared equals negative 32. I divide by 2. So g squared equals negative 16. Now here, if I took the square root of this, if you did that on your calculator, you can't take the square root of a negative number. So this is where you would have the no solutions. Because you cannot take the square root of a negative number. There is no number that I could put in and then square it, times it by 2, add 32 to get 0. It absolutely will not work. All right, that's it for your notes.